everyone. Thank you for coming to the Ralph Bunche Library. Before we get started, please turn off your cell phones. Don't just mute them, but please turn them off because they'll interfere with our recording. And when we get to the question and answer period, please wait for the microphone. I'll bring the microphone to you so that we can get your question on the video also. Today we have Ray Batvinis, who is a retired special agent for the FBI. He has worked on several significant cases. He worked on the Ronald Pelton case, John and Michael Walker, Thomas Dolce, and Daniel Walter Richardson. He has a degree from Iona College, and after he retired, he got a PhD in history from Catholic University. He is an adjunct professor at George Washington University, also at Merchurst University and the Institute of World Politics. He is the executive director of the J. Edgar Hoover collection, J. Edgar Hoover Foundation, and he has been involved in the J. Edgar Hoover collection of recordings, photographs, artifacts, works of art, and correspondence. He's worked with J. Edgar Hoover's law school notebooks. So he is well immersed in the FBI culture and FBI history. Today he's going to talk about his new book, The War Against Axis Spies, FBI Counterintelligence in World War II. Ray Batvinis.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming.
Appreciate it.
Can you take off your...
That's great. Good afternoon, everyone. It is truly, normally you would say it's a pleasure to be here, but I would say truly it's an honor for me to be here at the Ralph Bunche Library. Over the past week or two, I've been reflecting on it, and to think that Joe Batvinis' kid, who never got to a junior year in high school, and his kid is teaching, giving a presentation to a group of State Department officials in 2014. I think my dad would be very proud of me, and so I'm very, very honored to be here. I'm also very thankful to Hugh Howard for inviting me here today. I also want to single out Amy Miles for the fabulous flyers that she produced. They're wonderful, and I want a copy before I leave here today. And also to Sarah Shue for your kindness to me today. And also to the unsung heroes who have to put up the chairs here, the people behind the scene, the guys who have to sit behind the cameras and have to do the donkey work. I've been there, done it, got the T-shirt, and so I have great respect for you too. And I've got great respect for librarians. I really do, because a researcher, whether you're in the government or not, whether you're an FBI agent or not, you rely on librarians. And anybody who thinks that this country doesn't appreciate librarians or libraries ought to attend the National Book Fair. All these years I've been meaning to do this, and I just haven't had a chance to do this. My wife was in Florida, so I was batching it, so to speak, in my house. I said, I'm going to the darn book fair. So I went to the book fair at the convention center, and boy, we were elbow to elbow in that place. There were so many people there because people really do appreciate books, and they appreciate librarians. And a funny quick story, we had a case. It wasn't my case, in the interest of full disclosure. We talk about librarians. It shows how much we think in terms of the Library of Congress, but we really don't know what the Library of Congress is all about. And a source, the Bureau was working the George Trofimoff case, and George Trofimoff was about 76 years old, and he was one of the oldest ever convicted of espionage, and the highest ranking military officer in this country to be convicted of espionage. He was a full bird colonel, and he was an agent of the Soviets and the East Germans for about 25 years while he served in the military. And the investigators had to get a catalog of former Russian generals and I'll be frank with you, I can't recall the connection, but he was being tried in Tampa, and the prosecutor wanted it. So the agent here in Washington Field had to go up to the Library of Congress to obtain this kind of obscure information, and a librarian knew exactly where it is, went to the folder, and here was the photograph that was required. So the FBI agent said, well, where do I get my lending card? Okay. And the guy said, you don't quite understand the Library of Congress. We don't loan books from the Library of Congress. In this particular case, the librarian who had access to this book in the catalog right up here at the Library of Congress had to answer a federal subpoena, had to take the book down to Tampa, had to testify at his trial, and then literally take the book right back that afternoon, so after he testified. So librarians play a pretty big, an important part in our lives. They play a pretty important life in federal prosecutions, and they've always played an important part in my life. What I'd like to do today, in the interest of time, I want to break down, and by the way, if you have any comments or any observations, please get your hands in the air. And if you have any questions, even if that goes beyond the scope of my presentation, again, please get your hands in the air. I'd be happy to answer any questions that I can, okay, about the FBI or federal law enforcement in general. What I want to do is I want to break down my comments basically into 4 segments, talk for about 30 or 40 minutes perhaps, and break them down into 4 manageable segments, and then open it up to Q&A from you. And I want to get into take a few minutes to talk about why I wrote this book and how it began. Number 2, what the book is actually all about. What is actually in the book. You, the public, you're the ones who are going to have to lay out the money for it. And I hope you do, obviously, okay? But you're the ones who are going to have to lay out the money for it. Money is dear. You're federal employees, so every dollar counts. You got kids in college, and so it's important. So the point is, you have to know what's in the book, and I'm going to try to give you a breakdown of what's in it. And then, because of the particular audience here, I'm going to focus in on an aspect of the book that may be of more interest to you than perhaps the actual espionage part, and that's the issue of the formation of the American relationship with Great Britain as it related to counterintelligence matters. I'm not going to get into the issue of William Donovan and the formation of OSS, because we frankly just don't have the time, but that does play a role. But I want to talk to you a little bit about the counterintelligence aspect and the problems that surfaced and the role that the State Department played in this effort. And then finally, what I want to do is just close by talking to you about some of the unique sources that I was able to tap into. I was actually introduced to Hugh a couple of months ago when Mark Bradley stood where I'm standing and made comments about his book, A Very Dishonorable Boy, the story of Duncan Chaplin Lee. And one of the great sources that he had, it doesn't get any better than this, he was able to tap into Lee's family. The Lee family gave him access to their father's papers, his writings, were able to sit down with the author and provide their insights into their own father. It doesn't get any better for an author than that. My sources are a little bit different. They're really a little bit more textual, but significant nonetheless. The way I got into this book, actually 9/11 plays a major role. There's probably not a person in this room here, I doubt it, you know where you were on 9/11. Everybody knows where you were on 9/11. What's interesting is I just came from, I'm feeling my age, I just came from teaching an undergraduate course at GW, and I look out there on this particular memorable day that's seared into everybody's memory, and I'm looking at, and the average age of these students was 8 when when 9/11 occurred. So you wonder if it's even in their memory banks. They know it abstractly, perhaps, but do they really feel it? My book started really before 9/11, but 9/11 is sort of a seminal point because it was about it was about 3 months before I did my oral defense of my dissertation. And I did my dissertation on the origins of the FBI's counterintelligence program. And you better be careful what you say, because there was somebody on my defense committee who said, you ought to publish this. Well, obviously that played right to my what? Right to my ego. But I had no idea how to get anything published. But like all of us in life, we sort of stumble and bumble, go down false alleys, go down the right alleys, and eventually the first book was published. And the book started, the original book started because I was in Washington field office, and WFO of the FBI, Washington field office, at that time was in the old post office building, the one Donald Trump is going to make a hotel out of now, okay? And I was there, and I'm looking around. I was on an applicant squad, and I'm looking around the squad room, and there were only 2 categories of agents. We had 25 or 50 agents on each squad. It was enormous. It was an applicant squad, and there were only 2 categories of agents on each squad. There were either guys who were younger than 30 or over 60. There was nobody in between. And I'm looking at some of these older guys, which I are now, okay, and I'm hearing stories about these guys having served in South America and having worked in South America during the Second World War. And I kick myself every day right now that I never sat down and had a chat with them. And I didn't sit down because I was too busy learning my craft. I was too busy trying to raise a family and just, get through the day. But these were the guys who served undercover in South America. And they served undercover. They served with the State Department. They posed as State Department employees. They posed as businessmen. It is a remarkable story of the FBI's role, not in counterintelligence, but in foreign intelligence collection, what the CIA does today in terms of going out and recruiting spies, and it's an untold story. So this is really what sort of spawned what spawned my interest in this. And then I got into counterintelligence. I got into the world of counterintelligence in Washington field office. And I tell my students this: I get in not because I wanted to experience the world of counterintelligence. I got in because I wanted to get off the applicant squad, okay? And like someone once said, the best things that happen to you in life, you back into. And that's exactly what happened to me. And I spent the rest of my career in it, working with men and women in the State Department. I spent a lot of time coming over here and talking to desk officers. So this is how it started. And after I retired, I swore to God I was never going to work for anybody again in my life except for me, okay? Because since I've been 9, I've been working for somebody, okay? And I swore I wasn't going to do it. So, and I've had a wonderful time in my life, working for the FBI, and before him, but I've had an even better time working for myself, okay? So I began to say, how did this begin? In other words, this craft, this element of statecraft that I was so intimately involved in for so many years in my professional life, how did it begin? And that sort of spawned my interest. So when I had to look around for a doctoral topic, I went back and I wanted to look at how the FBI became the counterintelligence service that it is today. And I was blessed because I had a marvelous dissertation advisor who was not a member of the Catholic University staff. He was an adjunct, and his name is Harry Langley. He lives over here in Northern Virginia. And Dr. Langley I was really lucky because Dr. Langley had served in the Second World War. He'd seen action in the Pacific. He was a military historian at the Smithsonian. So he had walked the walk, and he can talk the talk. So I was blessed to have him as my dissertation advisor, and he shepherded my proposal through the dissertation committee to get the approval. And the one thing he told me was, he said to be very, very careful because you don't want to get down the line in your research, find out you don't have enough material. Well, that was just the opposite. So I wound up having too much material, and my job was trying to edit it down So that was my first book, and I took a look at how it was formed, how it went from a very small law enforcement organization, federal law enforcement organization, with we wouldn't call them counterintelligence because that wasn't even on the scope. Basically, with espionage responsibility and counter-espionage responsibility, forgive me, enforcement of the espionage laws, but we weren't doing this. How it morphed into from a small law enforcement organization to a counter-espionage organization, meaning strictly reactive, into a counterintelligence organization in May of 1940, when the President of the United States authorizes J. Edgar Hoover to begin to wiretap embassies and to put in microphones, which broadened the scope completely, and then into a foreign intelligence organization in July of 1940, just months afterwards, in which we are actually sending out